Hello everyone, my name is Paul. Welcome back to the new news. I hope that everyone is having a fantastic night. I hope that everyone had a wonderful Wednesday. It is the midday of the week, so congratulations. Give yourself a pat on the back. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world today. There's a ton of stuff happening inside of Ukraine, of course, and there's a ton of stuff going on outside of Ukraine too. And a lot of this stuff, generally speaking, isn't necessarily good. We're talking about governments having issues, protests. We're talking about military operations, conflicts, wars, drought, famine. We're talking about excessive heat waves. We're talking about all sorts of stuff happening. But luckily, you guys have made this an awesome community and allowed us to be the news that gives back. And that is the whole mission here at the New News. We want to be able to give back. We're never doing super chats on this channel. We are never pushing merchandise. The 100%, everything we do goes to charity. So if you please check out the description below, you're going to see a ton of different organizations to the point that we actually hit the milestone of we can't add more with their descriptions. We had to remove descriptions off of these things. 80% or more of all the donations that these organizations and fundraisers receive will actually go directly to their program, and you can't independently vet these. I'm talking about everything for the war in Ukraine, whether you're supporting the war effort itself or you're supporting humanitarian efforts ongoing there in and around the region. Or you're talking about things such as extreme drought and famine in places such as Ethiopia and Somalia, or even recovery efforts for Southeast Asia, which was hit by Super Typhoon Rai. And of course, we're constantly looking for more. So if you happen to have one or several that you may want to suggest to us, because we are constantly trying to expand upon that, please go to our Discord. The link is also in the description, and you can check out that Discord, of course, but get in touch with a staff member on our staff team. They're clearly labeled there with their own ranks within that location, and you can reach out to them, send them a link as well as a short description of your organization or organizations, and we'll start that vetting process and hopefully be able to get them added to the stream and to the program on our official website and everything else there, so that way we can continue to expand the amount of places we can help. And I please implore you to check out not just Ukraine. I know that is the main subject right now, but that has taken the spotlight away from millions of other people in other locations, once again, such as the Horn of Africa, where children the age 5 and under are specifically at risk for that. Many of them are suffering from anywhere from acute to extreme malnutrition, life-threatening malnutrition. 90% of the people in the Tigray region require humanitarian assistance just to survive, and it wasn't but a few weeks ago that they got their very first humanitarian convoy to actually enter the region since the start of the war in Ukraine. Most of the locations globally have had their rations cut in half as a result of the war and the emergency efforts required, and that has become something that is almost unsustainable at this point. So please make sure to give them a lot of love and affection. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give a little. If you can't give anything at all, then as cheesy as it sounds, give us a like and subscribe and let your friends know about us. So basically, the more times you subscribe and the more likes that the videos get, the more comments and stuff like that, the algorithm, the way YouTube works, it bolsters how many people see this. And the more people that see this and come here, join in on the community, and the more people you let know about it that come and join in on this community, the more people overall will be here, and the bigger of an impact this channel will have for good throughout the world and helping people in the very news stories that we talk about here on the channel every single night. So thank you for the support you've already given us, and even more so, thank you for the support you've already given these organizations. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and dive right into the news with our special report here in Ukraine. And we're going to start off, and when you see a yellow paw print, you know what that usually means. And that usually means there's a Patron nearby. Patron is celebrating a happy birthday today. Patron, which stands for cartridge in English. He's a Ukrainian bomb-sniffing dog. He's a sapper dog. He is a icon coming out of Ukraine. He's loved by children and about everybody else. I absolutely love Patron. I think he's absolutely adorable. His vest has a carry handle on it, so he can just be carried around like a suitcase. He is one of the most adorable and pure things to come out of this war. He's used to teach children about the dangers of unexploded ordnance, which will paralyze Ukraine for decades to come. And that is very important, especially with children who are exceptionally at risk when it comes to unexploded ordnance and booby traps and stuff that have been littered all around Ukraine, even in places that have long since been liberated over the last couple of months. But today he took a nice break. He actually had a wonderful They made him his own special, as you can see, his own special birthday cake. Isn't that just adorable? Come on. How can you not love this? It's Patron, guys. Look at that. Look at that bow tie. Look at those eyes. How can you not love this dog? He's amazing. And they also happen to bless us with a video of this very same event. So we're going to check that out right now. How can you not love this dog? If you do not love this dog, then there's no hope for you in this universe. I'm sorry. But in all seriousness, though, he is a pretty awesome. He's a social icon because he's found over 400 pieces of unexploded ordnance between the Kiev and Chernihiv regions. He's been extremely successful. His bomb squad has been constantly working since the beginning of this war, and really without any breaks. He's used widely to teach children about the dangers of unexploded ordnance. He's been given awards. He's done all sorts of things. He is really a great way to teach, especially a younger generation, the dangers that they may not fully understand. I mean, adults alone are in enough danger, let alone children who really don't know what to do. Us, your average viewer here probably knows the difference, is old enough to understand, that's a rocket. I shouldn't touch it. For the most part, like, there's exceptions to every rule, but children, not so much. They're going to be like, ooh, what's this thing? What's that? What's this? What's that? Let's play with it. I wonder look how cool it is. And it's, when you're talking about explosives, that's not good. So, Patron's being used very widely in that regard to teach children those dangers, because this is something that's going to affect Ukraine for a very long time. The amount of ordnance fired inside of Ukraine on a daily basis is monumental. And it's something that we haven't seen in this amount since World War II. So, it's very important, and he plays a huge role in that. And besides, he's adorable. You can't not love this dog. As we jump over here into the Kharkiv Oblast, as we start working our way down into the Donbass, we start getting really into the meat and potatoes of the war. And the fact is that this war is taking a toll even in regions that are relatively liberated. Kharkiv is no longer within range of standard Russian artillery guns. They can't be hit by Grad rockets. They cannot be hit by DPK-30s. They cannot be hit by 2S1s, 2S3s, or the Mistas. They can't be hit by any of these. The only thing that can hit them is long-range theater ballistic missiles. The Russian force has been pushed back to the point that they are no longer able to use their conventional artillery against the city of Kharkiv, but they have been using it very widely against the surrounding region. This is coming from Oleh Subinov, who's the head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration, and he has said, quote, rocket attacks on the Chuhiv, Izium, and Budikiv districts of the Kharkiv region on July 20th. 8 people were injured, 1 citizen was killed, end quote. But this war is affecting everybody. And we talk quite extensively. As of today, 353 children have been killed in Ukraine, with another additional roughly 500 to 600 that have already been wounded. And those are just the confirmed, according to the Prosecutor General's office within Ukraine. What this is affecting is it's affecting an entire younger generation. Those that are going to survive this war will be traumatized beyond all belief. These will be traumas that they will carry with them through their entire lifetimes. And what we see here is the death of a generation, the death of hope for a generation. It's hard enough for someone who lives it as an adult to fathom what they have gone through, but they also can kind of understand, they have some things of their childhood to look back to. When you destroy someone's childhood, or you just killed their friends and family, then you kind of wash all of that away, so that's kind of what's happening here. It's affecting everybody, but it truly is the death of the next generation. 2/3 of Ukrainian refugees are children. They have been traumatized. They have family members that are fighting on the front lines. Their homes have been destroyed. Their friends have been killed. or wounded severely. Their family has been killed. There's orphans that are being taken from orphanages throughout the Donbass, and they are being forcibly deported to Russia. It's the death of a generation. And we see that here. More Russian missile strikes hit Kharkiv today. It killed 3, including a 13-year-old boy his father found his body, which had been covered, and remained holding his son's hand and praying and crying for over 2 hours. Quote, once again coming from Ole Subinov, Russian aggressors fired missiles at the city of Kharkiv on July 20th. 3 people were killed, including 1 child, and 1 citizen was injured. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about the war. Because everyone is interested in, what ammunition is being used, what is happening, in this war, between the different warring parties. We're talking about, weaponry, the HIMARS. We're talking about, how the HIMARS is being used, or how the M777 is being used, or whatever. But all of this has an impact. And the impact is that there are still civilians in these cities. There are still civilians throughout this entire country. And they're dying. There's no tactical or strategic importance for Kharkiv anymore. If you're going to take Kharkiv, it was going to be much earlier in the war. You can't hit it with your normal artillery, so they rely on ballistic missile launches every single day from the city of Belgorod. It does nothing. It's worth nothing. You have no chance of taking Kharkiv anymore. That's gone. And yet, children continue to die in Kharkiv for no reason. No reason. That is the result of this weaponry. That's the result of artillery guns. That's the result of tanks. The fact of the matter is, there will never be a war where civilians don't die. There will never be a major war where civilians do not die. Men, women, and most horrifically children. And we see that over and over again. 353, now 354 times. Over and over and over again. Xenocide 21 stated, Ukraine should attack Belgorod, full on boots, tanks, helicopters, jets, throw everything at them. See, that's the problem. You can't declare a defensive war against Russia and then immediately invade Russia. So that would be what that would amount to. It would be an invasion of Russia. And an invasion of Russia, therefore, would mean a full mobilization of the Russian Federation, an official declaration of war to free up any logistical and especially manpower holds that they may have, turning their entire industrial economy, whatever's left of it, the tattered pieces, and turning it against Ukraine, which they can't do now. There's limitations because it's considered a special military operation still. And it also would, in a way, prove the Kremlin right. That's the biggest damnation of doing that. No matter how much you want to, you can't invade Russia. Like, NATO just can't get sick of this shit and just invade Russia and just be done with it. Because if there's one thing, the Russians, aren't stupid people. Russian people are not dumb. Okay, many of them use VPNs. Many of them are still getting foreign news. A lot of the ones that are hardliners for Putin are usually some of the older generation, ones that are old enough to remember the hard times under Boris Yeltsin and the collapse of the Soviet Union, not usually the younger generation. And the issue is there's nothing more unifying than a common enemy. Right now, the people there's a division within the people between hardliners and people that aren't hardliners, which is mostly the younger generation, which is more forward thinking, and they are less so, canny to what their government's doing. And when you start talking about Ukraine invading Russia, and you start talking about NATO conducting military operations against Russia or Belarus, what that does is you end up proving the rhetoric of the Russian Federation correct to its own people, which then unifies them, and now they do have a reason to fight. Right now, one of the big issues that you have in Ukraine, especially amongst the manpower that's still there, is morale. They're not fighting for any good reason. Ukraine is fighting because they don't want to all be exterminated, essentially, and lose their entire way of life. That's a good thing to fight for. That's going to put a fire in someone's heart. Okay? And it's going to do it thousands upon thousands of times over for thousands of Ukrainians that are willing to die for that very reason. They have a thing they're fighting for. They have something to fight for. Your average Russian soldier on the front line doesn't have crap but a paycheck. That's demoralizing. It's been proven time and time again that alone will lose a war. But if all of a sudden there's an invasion of Russia and the Kremlin is now proven right, there is a threat to the Russian people, there is the possibility of an invasion, or there is an invasion of the Russian people, that now gives them that fire in their hearts to fight. And that's a force multiplier when you're talking about the battlefield. Erevis Shank says, can Ukraine attack the Donetsk and Luhansk, what they're called, governed by the Russia? Certainly. You certainly can. Because even Russia allowed the plausible deniability there. The Russian government is far underestimated the war in Ukraine. They far underestimated that, and they far underestimated when they did go back and reestimate what they are going to be able to physically achieve. And we see that happening all across the country right now. But they left plausible deniability. You see this with their employment of the Wagner Group, which is a mercenary organization. It's a private military corporation for Russia. And they've used the Wagner Group in order to have plausible deniability. The Wagner Group, for all intents and purposes, to give you the best idea, it's just an extension of the Russian military. That's all it is. It's another division in the Russian military that all Russia can do. All it is different is that the guys get paid a little bit more than what the actual contracted soldiers do. And they can be sent anywhere with Russia saying, oh, it's not us. Nope, they're not under the Russian Federation military. They're not under any of our orders. You see this in Syria in 2018 when they attacked a U.S. military outpost. You see that in Mali when they were setting up when they were caught on drone video cameras setting up a fake mass grave. And you see that here in Ukraine. The Donbass, the LPR, quote unquote, the LPR and the DPR, the Donetsk People's Republics and the Luhansk People's Republics, and any other People's Republics, the Kherson or whatever they're planning on making next, all of that is a plausible deniability factor. You're not attacking Russia if you're attacking those. You're attacking the DPR. You're attacking the LPR, which according to Russia are independent nations. So yes, you certainly can attack them. Hitting ammunition depot in Russia is okay, right? Yes. So we've seen that before. We've seen Belgorod alone be hit before. where they hit, an oil storage depot. They seem to have hit train tracks. They've also seen that up in Bryansk, where they've hit that. We've seen shelling of ammunition depots along within the Belgorod region, in this border region here in Ukraine and Russia. And we see that going back and forth. It's limited in scope, and that's the thing. And it's also, there aren't any ground troops. We'll see Ukrainian helicopters occasionally, like we did several months ago, which was awesome. Those pilots were amazing. It's a very risky maneuver to do something like that, but it's possible. You can. That's why there's so many. That's why there's so many air defense systems around Belgorod, because it got hit repeatedly earlier on in the war. And so you certainly can do this. You certainly can fire rockets and missiles back into Russia. I think that the key difference is that's not an invasion. And Ukraine and Russia really can't pose it as an invasion. They're firing on a border region next to their nation against a nation that they're at war with. You can't construe that as an invasion because there aren't any troops on the ground going in, tanks and helicopters and everything else. Well, helicopters occasionally, but you're not landing an air assault force in Belgorod. That's the difference. You're not putting troops into Russia. That's an invasion force. And one of our mods, Kaysen, just said, hey, they just keep smoking in the wrong spots. Totally accidents. Yeah, we've heard that too. Russia really doesn't want to admit that they've been hit on their own soil. And so they usually say, if something went wrong at this ammunition depot, or someone was smoking where they weren't supposed to be, or even inside of Ukraine, they'll be like, it wasn't an ammo depot, it was a bunch of saltpeter. Or actually, no, it wasn't saltpeter, it was ammonium nitrate. So they just continually change their stories. But yeah, I mean, it's happened before. It will certainly happen again. Ukraine has the ability to strike that deep into Russia. They're hitting border regions. It's not like an imminent threat. You're not putting boots on the ground, so you're not going to probably see a major repercussions outside of more reprisal missile strikes and shellings, which isn't anything crazy. We've seen that throughout the entire war. When it comes to Russia, they're constantly conducting reprisal attacks. Vinnytsia is considered a reprisal for what had happened in Kherson, and I can believe that, and I think we're going to see that quite often. Russia, a lot of these war crimes, while systematic in their purpose, and I think it's a genocide done poorly in personal opinion, a lot of what is a perpetrator of war crimes, really the reasoning behind war crimes, is frustration. Frustration at taking losses, frustrations at not having gains, frustrations in being pushed back. You see this quite often. The Russian shelling of Kharkiv is no different. They're frustrated. They can't hit it with normal artillery anymore. They don't have it encircled. They only have one thing they can hit it with. They're hitting it with the only thing they can left, and that's Iskander and missile systems. It's a frustration. It's a war crime. It's a reprisal, but it's perpetrated through frustration of the Russian chain of command and the Russian government. As we start moving down here into the Donbass and we start looking at the actual meats and potatoes of what's happening down here in the war, this is really the main factor of the front line. We're talking about when we get here into the Donbass, the Luhansk, the Donetsk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Mykolaiv. We're talking about that's the main sector of the war. Overall, the front line is the equivalent of like 2,500 square kilometers, which is the distance between Moscow and Barcelona. But that is including the entire country and the border with Belarus. Really, when you're talking about the main concentration of Russian forces, you're really talking about anywhere from just south of Kharkiv, just to the southeast of Kharkiv, over by Chuihiv, and over here and around, basically trying to link up with Transnistria and running here pretty much a straight line until you hit Enhadar, in which case it runs just across the Dnipro River. But you can pretty much follow this front line, especially if you're following the firm's fire maps, for instance. But what we're looking at here is that we're seeing Russian artillery on the move in pretty large quantities. Here, this is located in the Luhansk region. Russian artillery here is on the move. As the city of Lysychansk and really the entire Luhansk region has been now under the Russian Federation occupational control, you're going to see them shifting concentrations of their troops to other locations. they're not looking to do a push right through Luhansk. What they're going to try and do is likely going to be an encirclement movement. They're going to what we're kind of expecting and what we're hearing from other intelligence services as well is that there seems to be a buildup of Russian forces in a precursor bombardment of the city of Bakhmut, as well as the city of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk. We see that pretty much on the daily at this point. There is an immense amount of upticks in shelling, and we're seeing Russian artillery groups moving into these regions to provide additional shelling. Russian Federation is going to hit these areas with a precursor bombardment to soften up defenses, quote unquote. And then they're going to conduct an armored spearhead through these locations to actually take control of these cities and then continue on. And what that does is it's going to try and do a wide encirclement of Ukrainian forces within this region. We could also see a possible push over by Toretsk and over by Kostianivka, just because this major highway artery running here runs straight up here towards Kramatorsk and Slavyansk as well, and that's going to basically be able to be a perfect kind of marker for where troops should be encircling at their main axis of advance and give them a straight line to pushing supply lines up. But that's kind of what we're looking at here, and we see artillery being a big part of that, so let's take a look. So there is no audio with this one, but as you can see, this is a Peon. It's I believe it's a 200 millimeter artillery gun, 203, something like that. It's a very big artillery gun. This is a Russian Federation one, and why are they moving? Why are we not seeing any major big battles on the front lines? Well, the Battle of Lysychansk and Severodonetsk, which you can really roll into one. The battle for the Luhansk, I should probably better put it. It took so many military forces. There was such a concentration of troops just to take these locations. Now they're going to try and do what we expect is a much wider encirclement movement, and that's going to be at least along two major axes of advance, and it's going to cause these troops to either withdraw again, tactically withdraw to prevent from becoming encircled, or it's going to force the Ukrainian military to have to try and fight two major battles on two major fronts, which puts really big pressure on their troops and supply lines and everything else. It would be immensely difficult. And in order to do this, they need to have new main efforts and supporting efforts. The troop movements that, for instance, to kind of give you an idea what that means, the troops that would be pushing towards Bakhmut would be the main effort. The troops pushing to Slavyansk would be the main effort. But a supporting effort would be the artillery batteries that would be shelling not just Slavyansk, but maybe Cherkasky, maybe Mykolaievka, these areas. They would be shelling these, preventing from Ukrainian reinforcements and supplies trying to go to Slavyansk. You would also talk about small infantry movements. So while Bakhmut may become under attack, Toretsk may have a smaller offensive in that area, and that's going to pull the basically, while the main force is trying to take Bakhmut, that supporting effort still has to be stopped. And that's going to pull Ukrainian forces from defending Bakhmut and pulling them down to Toretsk, or pulling them down over to Kostanivka in order to fight the Russians there, as opposed to where they need to be fighting over on Bakhmut to stop the main force. You still have to defend against it, even if it's more of a diversion than it is realistic. But that would be a supporting effort. The actual forces taking the city are going to be the main effort. Russia's got to move those troops that they had near Severodonetsk and Lysychansk back to these areas and build up their forces again before they can launch these main big battles. And that's going to take time. That's why you're seeing a tactical pause along really this entire front over the last couple of weeks. And we continue to see that movement of equipment here. This is here in the kind of the region of Donetsk and Luhansk, is right here on the border. And we see another column of Russian tanks. It looks like it's going to be 5 of them just on the move. We're not going to see kilometers long tank movements anymore. Mostly because Russia found out that was a terrible idea at the beginning days of the war when they just got annihilated. But we are going to see Russian columns pretty frequently on here until these big battles really start, and then once those are over, we're going to see that once again as they kind of move on to their next objectives. Just take a look. And so, as you're seeing, now most of these look like they're much older models. And I'm trying to get a good look here. Most of these look like they're a little bit of older models, obviously, so I'm having a hard time identifying these. I'm a little rusty on this. It's been a year or two since I had to do this for a job. But these look like they may be... I want to say these might be T62s. This one looks more so... Yeah, this one looks like it's definitely a T62. Just by the headlight configuration and the road wheels here. This looks like it might be a T62. Now, we do know they're pulling older vehicles from their stockpiles and pulling them into action, which is a good indicator here. That's going to be a tank recovery vehicle and a maintenance vehicle. And then, of course, you're seeing back here where they're using civilian vehicles. Once again, they don't have enough logistical capabilities. They don't have enough military-built vehicles to support their own logistics, so they have to rely heavily on civilian vehicles that they have now seized and are currently have put into conscripted use in their military. Copyright music? Yeah. Yeah. I didn't care. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I was busy trying to figure out what tanks those were. If they copyright claim it, then it is what it is, I guess. It's the news, guys. But as we go over here, we can see more incendiary weapons usage. While this is being labeled as white phosphorus, which is the most common type of incendiary munition, I can't say for sure it is going to be an incendiary munition. One of the mods Kason just asked, is that a piece of roof on the side of one? I gotta go back and take a look now. Is that a piece of roof? Hold on, I gotta take a look at what they're talking about. Oh, okay. I think I see what you're talking about now. Okay. So first of all, this is called a javelin cage. So a javelin cage doesn't work to begin with. The cool thing about the javelin is it has two modes of attack. You have a direct attack and you have top attack. Top attack is where it goes up to a max MSL and then or a max flight level, and then it comes back down onto the target. It pierces the weakest point of the armor, which is actually the top of the vehicle. Believe it or not, the top of the turret is actually the weakest point on a tank. And it punches through that armor, and in a Russian tank, specifically the T-90s, T-80s, T-72s, there's a auto-rotating carousel, so there's ready ammunition in the bottom of the turret, which is all exposed. So as soon as you hit the top of the turret, you shoot a super molten hot copper jacket through the middle of that, and it detonates all the ammunition, and you have a 9-ton turret that's flying 200 feet in the air like a ragdoll. What you're seeing, so that's what the javelin cage is supposed to prevent. It doesn't work. The javelin goes through it like butter. It just doesn't work. This is not a piece of roof. Believe it or not, that's an actual thing. So, what this is it's not a piece of roof. It's a type of armor coating. It's a type of armor plating, and it does two things. So the first thing it does, especially if you back up here, you're going to be able to see it better. So the first thing it does is it provides extra protection on a tank, just on the side. It's very thin, and it's mostly to protect it against a little bit heavier weapons, like heavier small arms weapons, so like 14.5 millimeters and upwards. I mean, not that a tank cares too much, but I mean, anything you can protect your crew against, the better. But one of the main things it actually does is that looks like what it's meant to do is it's supposed to absorb. It's supposed to absorb certain types of light. That's why it's shaped the way it is. Some are more effective than others. A lot of anti-tank missiles, especially more advanced ones like the Javelin, rely on infrared light. And that includes heat signatures and stuff like that. You're picking up heat signatures with it. And if you can see here with this one that doesn't, you can see the exhaust coming out the side. There's an exhaust vent in the side of the tank. That's where the exhaust port is on a tank's engine, and it pours that out. Now, if we jump over here, we can see that you're not going to see that because this is covering that exhaust port. So what this does is it limits the actual signature of the tank and the amount of heat being given off to a tank if you were to look at it with a thermal imaging optical. It doesn't work fantastic. There's better ways to do it, much better and more effective ways to do it, but that's the point. It kind of absorbs some of that light. It provides some additional armor, not that it's too needed, but it blocks the heat signature of the tank. And normally, if it's going to be this tank, you're going to be looking at, so we're seeing, 1 antenna, 2 antenna, 3 antenna, and then we have this tank, which is, its own antenna, but it also has an additional antenna, and then you also are seeing, additional optics on this. You're seeing the side skirt armor. What this tells me is this is probably the command vehicle of the tank. This is probably the command vehicle of the column and for this unit, and I would probably hit this thing first because this looks like it has the most protection against whatever they're trying to protect against. It has the most importance of this vehicle in the convoy, with the only exception being this vehicle right here, which would either be my first or second target, as this is the recovery vehicle. There's not many of them that have been built, and I would hit this thing. It's a toss-up between the two. I would probably hit this thing second, though, if I was to target this column. Simply because you're wanting to hit anything with a lot of antennas because there's someone important inside of it, and then you want to hit anything that can fix people, with the exception, or fix the vehicles and equipment, with the exception of you don't hit medical vehicles because they're not a target. Sapinka, who is he's in our Discord community, and they say, pretty sure that tank is just using an awning for shade, much like a boat bimini top. I would say so, except for you can see. So they have it, and it does provide shade. So they have a tarp over the top of it, which is kind of funny, which I guess. But they're not using it for shade. And you can see the actual, if you look over here where the canvas isn't, you can see the actual cage armor on this thing. It's a Javelin cage. They build them. They have a lot of them. They don't work, and so guys just stop doing it. But if I was in a command vehicle, I'd want every chance I had. The problem with it is it also makes you a really big target because it sticks up above everything else. But it's not just, it provides some shade. It is about all it's going to do. But it is, it is an actual thing. Sadly, they thought it would work. The Ukrainians, with their magnificent destruction of tanks, has quickly proven them otherwise. Can you just bring your rocket launcher over there and take it out, Paul? First of all, it's a missile, not a rocket. A rocket is dumb, okay? Missiles are smart, rockets are dumb. Okay? Secondly, yeah, I do not like being called a rocket man. That's what assault men were, and they got rid of assault men. So, Rippo 351s. All you wonderful redesignated 11s out there. Or you just got kicked out. Rip. Anyway, secondly, no. I got my fill of combat and everything else when I was overseas, my first couple of deployments. And so I really have no interest in going back, and this is on a personal level. I have no interest in going back into this. This is a magnitude of war which is almost inconceivable to me. And my body, to an extent, is pretty busted up. So, to an extent, I feel like I'd be more of a detriment than I would be a help to anybody. You need someone who's fit. You need someone who's capable of doing things. And I know it sounds like a bunch of excuses, which is fine. But if I can't do the work anymore, It doesn't matter how good my knowledge is. If I can't run and gun, and I can't move as fast as I used to be able to, and if I'm rusty on some of my knowledge, and if I'm, there's a multitude of things that could be wrong. And also, I got kind of screwed up when I was overseas mentally, and I don't know how well I would be able to handle it anymore. So I think it's better if I not do so. Um, because once again, I think I'd be more of a danger than I would be to be helpful. And if you're only as good as your weakest link on the battlefield, and I don't want to be that weakest link. So that's on a really real level on that. So I would just rather be able to do this. As you decided on very understandable, you did your duty, and I thank you for it. Well, thank you for your taxes. Anyway, we're gonna move on now. We have more incendiary weapons munition usage. Incendiary weapons aren't inherently banned by the Geneva Convention. You can still use them. The issue comes when you're using them in highly populated civilian concentrations, meaning if you're using them in towns, cities, villages, and you're using them against personnel, which is what we widely see. Now, this is claimed to be white phosphorus. We can't confirm this to be white phosphorus. It has all the indicators of that same very chemical, a very bright white burning, giving off very thick white smoke when it's burning on the ground. It's used for smoke screens. We still use it even in the U.S. military, using it for smoke, but you can't use them against people. It's actually a war crime to do that. You can use them against ammunition depots and stuff like that, but we've seen the Russians use these, definitely not for that purpose. We've seen them used against infantry targets. We've seen them used in highly populated civilian concentrations, which actually breaks the third protocol of the Geneva Convention, and we see it once again here. So take a look. So, as you can see here, they're airbursting it. You can airburst multiple different types of ordnance. There are some that require it. Incendiary munitions, you don't. If you're going to lay smoke, you're usually not going to airburst it, or at least not at this level. What they're doing is they're detonating this, and you can see this really thick white smoke that's broiling up from this. That indicates to me it's probably white phosphorus. And it seems to have indicated as well with our staff member who sent this one in. And it's what they're doing is they're airbursting it and they're letting this stuff fall. It's burning at thousands of degrees. There's no way to actually put this stuff out. You have to wait for the chemical reaction to finish. Most of the time, the best way to, protect your stuff from it is to bury it, which we've seen done here on the channel. But what this is they airburst it and it spreads out over a larger area. It will cover more ground and therefore it will burn more. We know that this probably isn't hitting an ammunition depot. It's just hitting a random location, probably personnel. And the reason because of that is anything this stuff would touch would instantly explode. It will burn you through head to toe. It will burn right through you, no problem. And then it would burn through whatever ordnance you have. It would detonate it. So we know it's not being used against a target. It needs to be used against by the Geneva Convention. So that tells me one of two things. It doesn't look like it's a town or village, so that doesn't break the protocol of the Geneva Convention, the third protocol on that. But what it does break it, or breaks the rules of customary international humanitarian law, which states that you can't use it against personnel. And that seems to be what the likely chance is that they are using it against. You jump over here, more javelins at work, as we were just talking about javelins. This is more javelin top-down action. Once again, we see yet another Russian tank sitting here at a checkpoint, and it is destroyed by a javelin anti-tank missile. And you'll see the immense amount of destruction this causes and why javelin cages just don't work anymore. So this is coming right from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and just take a look. Yeah, as you can see, his friend is not so keen on meeting the same fate. Yeah, so it's burning nice and toasty. And a good way we could tell, yeah, see that? Yeah, his friend's not interested. But as you can see, so here's the tank, and it looks like, I mean, I can't really make out what this is, but it looks like it's got a pretty big snorkeling system on the back, or maybe some extra fuel tanks, so I'm going to guess and say it's either a T-80 or a T-72. Just spitballing. And what you see here is you see this right there. See that little sliver of light that's hovering above my cursor? Yeah, that's a Javelin missile about to screw this guy's days over. I mean, these guys are done. They're finished. What this thing is doing is it's now hit its max MSL. It's using gravity, and it's using some, what they're like little thrusters on the back. That actually, it's called a control actuator. And it's adjusting the fins on the back, and it's tracking this target all the way down, you know, as it's watching. And it's, the front end of this thing's called a seeker. And it literally is, it seeks a target, and it's seeker. And it's adjusting it mid-flight all the way down with gravity, and adjusting the fins and adjusting the fins, and maybe pushing it a little bit this way, a little bit that way with some very minor fuel tanks. And all of a sudden, what this thing's going to do is it's going to impact the top of the turret, which we see right there, and you see where it just dips. So it did a hard angle dip, and it immediately drops right into the top of the turret. And what this has now done is it's exploded. You have the precursor charge hit the front, or hit the top of the turret. It detonated itself. That's going to remove any reactive armor. The main charge just detonated, and it just inverted a copper jacket, which is now going to be superheated, and it's going to shoot into that tank. And what now happens in a few little microseconds, nanoseconds, whatever, is now that hot jet of molten liquid has now gone into the tank. It's punctured and burned right through the armor, melted it, spewed itself all over the inside of the tank, and now all of that ready ammunition at the bottom of the turret carousel is now detonated. Any ammunition, machine gun ammunition, high explosive rounds, anti-tank rounds, heat rounds, AFSDS, all of that has now detonated in the bottom of this turret. And now it appears that some hatches were at least open, because we don't see a turret flying off. The pressure isn't built up enough, and there's not enough of a difference in air pressure for the turret to actually pop off of this. So that pressure is now going to escape through the turrets, but this is a catastrophic kill. And we can see that as the fireball ensues. You see the whole thing go up in flames. Now that ammunition is shooting at each other, and it's punctured the fuel. In this, it's punctured through the engine, any crew compartments, the non-ready service ammunition in the bottom of the tank, and now you can see it's just smoldering. I'm not seeing a turret having popped off. I'm seeing the flames. If you can check out there, you can see the flames. They're shooting through the commander's hatch of this turret. They didn't pop it off. So that's how this is going down. And his friend, immediately realizing what has just happened, is going to run as fast as possible, not knowing, unfortunately, that the Javelin anti-tank missile has no problem traveling 2.5 kilometers to kill you. So he probably did not escape, and unless they didn't have another missile on by or next to them, I can only imagine he also met a very dubious end at the hands of a Javelin anti-tank missile. We get our daily civilian casualty update here from the Donetsk Oblast, where, according to Pavel Korolenko, who's the head of the Donetsk Regional Military Administration, quote, rocket attacks in the Donetsk region on July 19th, 5 people were killed, 16 citizens were injured. That's end quote. But the HIMARS are shooting back, and we know that they are extremely effective. We can just look at the NASA FIRMS map just to check that one out. But we also received a report from the Department of Defense regarding the effectiveness of the HIMARS, which he aired here on the channel. We know they are proving very effective, to the point that the United States has made several big announcements, which we'll be getting to a little bit later in the stream. And we see the usage ramping up for the HIMARS. 12 systems are now in the country. are already either in the country or on delivery, as well as M270 systems, which were given to them by Germany and other allies. And they are being employed with these long-range, high-precision missile systems, and they are throwing a lot of hate and discontent downrange, accurate up to and within 1 meter of their intended target, meaning that these things, if they find an ammunition depot, they will destroy the ammunition depot. We can take a look at some of these things firing from just today. That is not how I would want to start my day, is being on the wrong end of that thing. A lot of people making fun of me and my javelin rhetoric over here. You get excited. Blowing stuff up is cool, okay? I don't know what to tell you. Blowing stuff up is awesome, especially when you get to do it with a missile that's worth more than what you'll ever make in your life. Yeah. Tank is literally chasing the tank, lol. That's coming from Erebishang. Xenocide, tank is slow, missile is fast and smart. Yes, missile is very fast and very smart. Huh, I am grunts. Anyway, as we move on here, it gets a little bit less laughable as we talk about Mariupol, though. And Mariupol, I think if you died in Mariupol, you were lucky. Because suffering in Mariupol now as a survivor is absolutely terrible. And we can see the scenes of the destruction. This is only this is what the city looks like just 7 minutes walk away from the drama theater. You can take a look. There's nothing left. If you'd survived Mariupol, you don't have a house, you don't have clean water, you don't have food, you don't have anything. There's no sanitation, you're dying of cholera. If you have diabetes, you've had everything amputated, probably with no anesthetic, probably with no nothing. I mean, it's terrible. And the daily queues to get any kind of drinking water are about 4 to 5 hours long. So if you got to wait 4 to 5 hours just to get drinking water, we do see Ukrainian Air Force as the Ukrainian Air Force as they continue to fight on. Both sides do not have localized air superiority over any part of the front lines, though in some regions Ukraine has localized air superiority in areas that are mainly controlled by them. Russia in places such as Mariupol and on the eastern sides of the country. They do enjoy localized air superiority, but the airspace is still contested over the country. No side has gained air superiority over the entirety of Ukraine. That's been a major drawback for the Russian Federation, as they haven't been able to enjoy that air superiority whatsoever, and it's allowed the Ukrainian Air Force to stay in the fight, especially as they continue to receive shipments of supplies and especially parts for their aircraft in order to continue the fight, get new pilots up in the air, replace their aircraft that have been destroyed, and continue the fight here on the ground, as both sides use heavy amounts of their air force in order to conduct close air support operations, or CAS, and they are currently using those to assist Ukrainian ground forces in defending or liberating certain areas, and the Russians are doing so in order to conduct minor offenses in some areas. We can see some of the Ukrainian Air Force operating here from today.
Иди ж ты сюда, родная.
In the long run, Jose Kabug. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. I'm terrible at pronunciations. But in the long run, Ukraine will win. And I think that's true, ultimately. When you look at this on a wider scale, it's really a matter of time. It's a war of attrition. And Ukraine, like I said, they got a fire in their hearts. They have something to fight for. The Russian soldier is really just fighting for a paycheck and a pension. Really good benefits afterwards, at least for the Russians. and by Russian standards, I should say. And it's Russia who's using mostly Soviet era stockpiles. They don't have night vision. Most of their troops don't have optics on their weapons. They're using iron sights. A lot of them are using equipment from the 80s, 90s. Not really up to date stuff. Their best stuff's already been fielded, and has been destroyed. So they're relying on older and older stockpiles, stuff that's less and less effective, stuff that's less and less reliable. And something else that we see is they have a massive advantage when it comes to artillery numerically. But their artillery doesn't fire as far as NATO artillery will, or as accurately as NATO artillery will. And they have a much more terrible time logistically. The thing about this war is people have pointed out, well, Ukraine's not that great tactically. Like, everyone just hypes them up. Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of it's territorial defense forces. Most of the guys that were trained by NATO allies and stuff, from 2014 and on until the beginning of the war, they're non-commissioned officers now. Their job is more to direct the troops than it is to actually be the ones pulling the trigger. He's telling the machine gunner where he needs to shoot. He's not just shooting at the enemy. He's telling where everyone else needs to shoot too, and he's trying to direct them and coordinate them. That's the guy that got trained by NATO, and that's really effective. But they aren't as good as you would think, like an American battle group would be, or just a NATO battle group would be. They're not. No, they're not. But no one should expect them to be. You don't have to be better. You don't have to be as good as, say, a German battle group or an American battle group would be. You just have to be better for the Russians, because in war there is no second place. You're just dead. And as long as all you have to be is better than the Russians, and we know how bad the Russians are doing, then it really already puts things in your favor. They don't have to be the best tactically effective military in the world. They just have to be better tactically and more effective than the Russians are that are facing them. And when in a war of attrition, that's all that really matters. Ukraine can supply itself more. It's got 32 countries, upwards towards 40 countries that are supporting it with humanitarian aid, with logistical supplies, logistical support. They're advising them. They're providing intelligence for them. They are training their troops. In the case of the United Kingdom, they're providing military equipment. They're providing that military training for that equipment in order to be able to use it. They're providing an immense amount of money. There's the Lend-Lease Act. There's an immense amount of support. Russia doesn't have that. Belarus doesn't have the stuff to provide that. Iran doesn't have the stuff to provide that. China doesn't care enough to provide it. They're worried about Taiwan. So Kazakhstan broke off most of its ties with Russia politically. It's very limited. North Korea doesn't have enough gasoline to run its own armored forces for a day. They have like 23 hours. They ran their entire military for a day. They would have 23 hours worth of fuel in a full total war capacity. North Korea isn't providing any game-changing aid to the Russian Federation. They're not. Like, even, Armenia, which is kind of, are they with them? Are they not? Like, Armenia isn't, they're worried about Azerbaijan. There's no support Armenia is going to give to Russia that's going to mean anything. Syria is in battle. There's 40-something factions there. Ukraine has 38 countries behind it. And in a war, economies and logistics mean everything. You can win a battle without an economy and logistics, but you're going to use up all of your ammunition and medical supplies and food fighting that one battle, and then when the counterattack comes, you don't have anything but your bare hands and the closest stick to fight back with. You're going to lose. And that's really the problem that Russia's running into, is you're hitting a lot of logistical lines with the HIMARS, and they may not have as good of they don't have as much artillery as Russia does, but they have better artillery than Russia does, so they can target that artillery, they can target their stockpiles. So overall, yeah, at the big picture level, yeah, Ukraine is 100% the advantageous one here for a victory. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of people that die, but overall, the victory is more and less in favor of Ukraine, to the point that I would question they could probably take back Crimea if they really wanted to, if they really wanted to push. If you just cleared out the Luhansk and the Donetsk and just kind of worked your way southward, and by the end most of your forces are concentrated in retaking Crimea. I mean, why not? It's your territory. I would take it back. So, I mean, there's a possibility there. I don't know if that's what they're aiming for, but it's open to that. And in the long term, I think that's might be where it's headed. Ukraine are blessed people living in peace. Nation, everybody a welcome for a good, every human. That's why I love Ukraine. Yeah, Ukraine is generally speaking a very, very good country. It's got its own problems, and they're very, very open to admit that. They still have a lot of reforms they got to do. There's a lot of stuff that needs done internally. There's corruption and all sorts of stuff, but you're going to find that anywhere, in any country. Ukraine just became a renewed democracy, essentially, in 2014, so they still got some time. They're relatively new. They have done a lot of reforms since 2014 and made a lot of big strides in that, and so I think there's a lot of good things about Ukraine. Never going to say it's perfect, but no country in this world is. It just, I mean, you take a look at Russia and it's the complete opposite. It's an authoritarian, militarized government. I mean, it's by a bygone era. Russia itself is just a rustic, I mean, it's a rustic antique of a bygone era, I think. We go over here to Nikopol, where Russian shelling hit the city. Nikopol has been under shelling from Enerhodar, but we will get into in a second. I think the Ukrainian forces did something about that. Russian shelling hit the city, according to Valentin Reznichenko, who's the head of the Dniprovets Regional Military Administration. Quote, Russian troops shelled the city of Nikopol in the Dniprovets region on July 20th. 2 people were killed and 9 citizens were injured, including 4 children. 3 local private houses are destroyed and about 10 are damaged. The rescue operation is ongoing. But we do know, when we've heard reports for several weeks now, that Enerhodar's nuclear facility is being used as a shield by Russian artillery guns and artillery systems that have been firing at Nikopol and the surrounding areas in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, or the Dniprovets Oblast. And I think that Ukraine decided that they had had enough of their shit. Because apparently here in Enerhodar was rocked by explosions. And several clouds of black smoke were seen rising from the nuclear compound itself. Reportedly, Ukraine has used loitering munitions, such as the famous kamikaze drones, to strike specifically at Russian artillery positions located within this facility. Striking at a nuclear facility is terrible. It breaks so many international laws. But striking at military infrastructure, using it as a shield also breaks those laws. Which is what Russia reportedly has done. They set up artillery positions within the nuclear facility's compound in order to prevent Ukraine from striking back at them. And I don't think Russia's quite realized that the Ukrainians aren't using the same guns that the Russians have anymore. That the ones that the Ukrainians have is a lot more accurate than what the Russians are able to field. And I don't think they quite understand just those capabilities, because they seem to have gotten several direct hits. The nuclear facility itself is perfectly okay. There is no destruction on the nuclear facility. There is no danger of it being critical or anything. They just hit artillery guns. And we can take a look at that here, because even RIA decided to record some of what was happening in Enerhodar today. So, if you don't want to put the whole world at risk, stop putting your stuff in places and using them as shields. Crazy, I know. We jump down here, and we actually go over here where another ammunition depot has been destroyed here in the Kherson Oblast. This one is much deeper. This is over here at the village of Skodovsk, which is here in the Kherson Oblast. Ukrainian forces continue to pound this area, but they hit at least another ammunition depot, which has been seen cooking off. Sorry that's super quiet, but it is cooking off. You can hear it burning and cooking off. And of course, this photo has been posted all over the place thus far, but it seems that another ammunition depot has been struck, and it is once again pretty deep behind the lines, indicating it's probably a HIMARS strike. It's not the only thing that happened here along the coast. Here at Kazern, we see that yesterday a 486K1 podlet was destroyed. A podlet is basically a mobile radar station. There are very few of them ever built by the Russian Federation. It's one of the most advanced pieces of equipment they have. It's very limited in numbers. One was destroyed by a HIMARS strike here in Luzern. According to Sergei Bratchuk, the spokesman of the Odessa Regional Military Administration, quote, the Armed Forces of Ukraine destroyed a Russian ultra-modern radar station 486K1 podlet in a settlement of Luzern in the Kherson region on July the 20th, end quote. And we saw some of this yesterday. However, I couldn't independently verify that it had occurred or where it had occurred, but now we have some further information, and here is that photo. It has indeed been destroyed. That is no longer usable by the Russian Federation in any way, shape, or form. Riley commented regarding the destruction of that ammunition depot. It's just another saltpeter facility. So they had a lot of reducing agent sitting next to it once again. It's a lot of 152 millimeter canisters of saltpeter. As you jump over here to the Antonovsky Bridge, we know that the Antonovsky Bridge was hit yesterday. It was shelled, and we got some more information. As the shells rained down on the bridge yesterday, it was pretty much crippled. This is something that I had talked about to some extent. While we're really, about the one thing we're better at doing than killing each other as human beings is building bridges. And it's really hard to blow something up that wasn't, it's really hard to knock down something that wasn't meant to be knocked down or fall. So the thing is, though, that all Ukraine has to do is make it essentially unusable for heavy vehicle traffic to cross. That means that supply trucks, tanks, artillery guns, and heavy equipment wouldn't be able to cross the Antonovsky Bridge, and would limit the amount of supplies and equipment and troops that would be able to come over into the Kherson Oblast and towards that front up by Mykolaiv Oblast, and would really allow the Ukrainians to much more easily basically whittle down Russian occupational forces on the defensive lines there in Kherson, and continue to drive them towards Kherson, and also limit the number that would be able to withdraw across the Antonovsky Bridge. Therefore, you essentially would destroy the entire Russian battle group without any chance that they would be returning or fighting in a different area. And that's kind of what we're hearing here. According to locals, this is from a local official, quote, I traveled along the Antonovsky Bridge. They turn freight transport around. Lorries and minibuses are the largest vehicles allowed to cross. They even turn their Urals around, and trucks are not getting through either. You can take a look at some of this here.
Вот идет само перекрытие моста металлическое. И пошли дальше. Вот они ровно бьют как раз вот возле этого перекрытия. Вот так общая картинка. Вот это вот ровный удар. Вот сюда вот как раз вот эта яма с КамАЗ. Видите, вот идет перекрытие сразу. Проезжай быстрее! Дальше пошли сюда. Упала. Сюда вот ракета упала. Это общая картинка. Общая картинка. Так где-то выглядит.
So that's the thing. They don't need to destroy the bridge. You don't have to bring down a whole section of the bridge. You just have to make it unusable enough that they can't put large vehicles across. And it seems to have been effective. If we just take a look, several people have taken the time. They mapped out the shelling across the bridge, and it is very, very accurate. It's about 20 meters in diameter so far. Very minimal traffic can cross it, and effectively cripples the entirety of the bridge and its ability to hold any kind of major vehicles going across this bridge without risking total collapse. Basically, it no longer maintains any kind of structural integrity, and that's all you really need to put the Antonovsky Bridge out of major action for the Russians. The only things that can cross now are rather light vehicles, and that's not going to bring a lot of artillery shells. That's not going to bring a lot of troops. It's not going to bring more tanks. All of that stuff now has to go through Novakhovka, which is the only other major crossing across the Dnipro River into the Kherson Oblast. And as we jump up over here in Limani, we see that journalism is a very dangerous job for those that are combat journalists. And, quote, Russian troops shelled the camera crew of a Portuguese public service broadcaster, RTP, in the village of Lomani in the Mykolaiv region on July 20th. That's coming from the press service of the National Union of Journalists of Ukraine. To jump over here into Odessa, we see that the Ukrainian forces have shot down yet another missile. According to the Operational Command South, quote, in the Odessa region on July 20th, Ukrainian Air Defense Forces shot down a Russian missile. But that is actually it for everything ongoing inside the country of Ukraine. But don't worry, there's plenty of other stuff happening outside of the country of Ukraine. Several of it pretty big things when it comes to what's happening for the war here. But first thing we have is some comedic gold here. So Belarus is conducting military exercises within its country's borders. And one of the things that they're doing is the Ministry of Emergencies, which is basically another militarized force of both Belarus and Russia. They both have this. They have their own drones and everything. They conducted a exercise today in Minsk. Needless to say, this should be taken as a lesson as to how you should not conduct military exercises. Just take a watch. I don't know if you can tell, but that's not how you parajump into a urban area. I don't think that man had any control over his parachutes. Yeah, not how you do that. I'm pretty sure he also just broke his legs. Both of them. He did not hit the ground at the proper rate of speed. I don't think. Now, I'm not an expert because I've never like skydived or anything, but that didn't look like it was good. So, wise word of wisdom, don't go parajumping into a highly populated area. You're probably going to slam into a car at a very high rate of speed, and that's also not how you should probably be conducting any kind of exercises. Jump down here to Belgorod, where we see more Iskander-M missile launches. This is what I was talking about earlier. Roughly 6 to 8 missile launches every single day, or at least in the mornings, out of Belgorod, Russia, where they continue up that rate of fire from within Russia's own borders on the city of Kharkiv. We can take a look at that here. So as you see, more Iskander-M missile launches. Jump up here into Moscow, where we have a couple different things. First one is malware was detected. Google discovered Russian malware on an app within its app store. What it's being used for is to identify Ukrainians. It specifically was advertised as a app for Ukrainians, who that way they could launch DDoS attacks against Russian sites. But in reality, the app was filled with malware from Russia that was designed to identify and track Ukrainians on their own devices. It's just another version of hybrid warfare when it comes to Russia. I'm surprised the lack of cyber warfare that's been conducted by the Russian Federation. The most we really see at this day and age is there's usually a lot of Russian bots, which luckily for this channel, we haven't had the opportunity to run into many of them. But needless to say, they do exist, unfortunately, and they are a cancer to society. But other than that, we haven't really seen a lot of Russian cyber attacks. We saw a couple really early on. There's been some stuff reported by Finland and Sweden and Latvia and stuff like that, but not really anything super major or crippling up until this point. I can still get on the president's website for Ukraine. I can still get on all government websites for Ukraine at this point. So nothing really all that major, which is rather surprising. So a little bit different. But only truly sovereign states. That's what Putin has stated. This is coming from the MID, also known as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Russia. Quote from Russia's Vladimir Putin: "A new era is coming, a new stage in world history. Only truly sovereign states can ensure high growth dynamics." Only truly sovereign states. Now, we've heard this Russian rhetoric before, where they say Ukraine isn't truly a sovereign state. There's one problem with that. According to the Russian Federation, Ukraine's not sovereign, right? The legal definition of a sovereign state is, quote, "a state with a defined territory that administers its own government and is not subject to or dependent on another power." Ukraine, prior to 2014, was not a sovereign state. They had the Maidan Revolution and became a sovereign state. You know what else isn't a sovereign state? Despite having that very same rhetoric, this is coming once again from Vladimir Putin, right? That very same rhetoric, therefore, does not apply to the DPR or the LPR, or any of the other PRs that are created through Russia or through Crimea. None of that is a sovereign state, because it's all dependent on the Russian Federation. So their own rhetoric, once again, just proves that they have no idea what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. They're just making stuff up because their own stuff is contradictory to what they're saying. So, very interesting from the Russians. Go over here. This is at Ramstein Air Base, which truly didn't happen at Ramstein. Most of this is Ramstein 4, and this is the 4th convention of the partners that are joining and assisting Ukraine and trying to get more aid to them. Most of this meeting was done remotely over web cameras and stuff like that. It wasn't done in person like the others have done so far. But several big announcements came out of this. 4 additional HIMARS rocket systems, along with 155mm ammunition, HIMARS munitions, M113s, and M577 APCs have all been announced through the Ramstein 4 from the U.S. and other countries, which once again was held remotely today. And we can take a look at some of that here. So this is directly from the Ramstein meeting today.
The United States is also committed to sending more HIMARS munitions, precision-guided artillery ammunition, and tactical vehicles, and other urgently needed support. And we'll continue to provide historic levels of security assistance to help Ukraine defend itself. And later this week, we'll roll out our next presidential drawdown package of weapons, ammunition, and equipment for Ukraine. It will be our 16th drawdown of equipment from DoD inventory since August 2021. It will include 4 more HIMARS advanced rocket systems, which the Ukrainians have been using so effectively and which have made such a difference on the battlefield. And it will include more rounds of MLRS and artillery ammunition.
So there you go. You heard it from the Secretary of Defense himself. Let's jump up here into London. Boris Johnson made his final appearance before the Parliament today, and he had some very interesting words. To his successor, he gave some advice. First, stay close to the Americans, protect the Ukrainians, and stand up for freedom and democracy everywhere. But his most memorable words of his entire speech happened to be his last few words to the government. So let's take a look.
Mission largely accomplished. For now, I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank all the wonderful staff of the House of Commons. I want to thank all my friends and colleagues. I want to thank my rival friend opposite, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank everybody here, and hasta la vista, baby. Thank you.
Hasta la vista, baby. From the Terminator. That's going to be a new meme. I call it here, right here on the channel. That will be a new meme. You heard it. Anyway, down here in Athens, as we move on to something actually more serious in any kind of nature, we see where in Athens, forest fires that have been ravaging many countries, including here in Greece, actually got here to the Greek capital of Athens. The backlight of this was actually lit up the Pantheon, which gave a rather ominous glow, as they're currently burning on the outskirts of the city. You can take a look at that here. Yeah, not what I want to wake up to on my Wednesday. Not interested. I've seen forest fires before when I was living out in California. They are pretty impressive, but not my idea of a fun time if I was to live in the damage path like these unfortunate individuals. Take a look here. This comes in the midst as the entirety of Europe and much of the world at this point is being gripped by very strong heat waves that are running globally at this point, and including over 1,000 people that have reportedly been killed as a result of the heat wave in Spain alone, melting of a tarmac over by Oxfordshire in England on a RAF base, and wildfires that have ravaged Spain, Portugal, France, the United Kingdom, Greece, and many others. As we jump down here into the Middle East, we start to get in some rather heavy topics. Here in Baghdad alone, there are currently protests ongoing in Baghdad that occurred in front of the Cultural Center, which is not the embassy, but the Turkish Cultural Center in Baghdad. The protests occurred after 8 Arab terrorists and 23 additional civilians were injured after Turkish airstrikes occurring near Duhok, which is in Iraqi Kurdistan, as part of their armed forces assault there. This has occurred as a result of airstrikes of the Turkish Air Force, and Turkish flag was taken down from the Cultural Center and burned. And we can take a look at some of those protests here. For those that don't know who that is, see if I can get that back. Ah, yes, the individual that turns up at every protest in Iraq. Oh, is there not a good photo of it? There he is. That's Sadr. So they're holding up a poster of Sadr. So Sadr, I believe, I can't remember his full name. I want to say it's Ahmad al-Sadr, but I know that's wrong. Anyway, he is a very important figure, especially in Baghdad for Iraqis. And Sadr is known be rather nefarious to begin with. He's very popular amongst Katiib Hezbollah, but he's also very popular amongst a lot of nationals. And he also is in charge of the peace brigades. It's not a peace brigade, in case you couldn't figure that out, considering brigade is within its name. It's an insurgent paramilitary militia. Same thing with the Sadr's army. In fact, his father fought against father and him as the successor fought against U.S. forces inside with the insurgencies in Iraq. They had a huge, and I do mean huge, sign of him over the top of one of the apartment buildings, and his name is Muqtada al-Sadr. I knew it was al-Sadr. I didn't know what the actual full name was. I just know him as Sadr because I heard his name a million times. Anyway, these are very reminiscent. This brings back some very intense, or I wouldn't say intense, but it brings back very vivid memories of the Iraqi embassy, especially with like the watchtowers and stuff in the background. I just think of the U.S. embassy back in 2020. Yeah, don't miss it. They're at least not throwing Molotov cocktails this time. As we go down here, we can see some of the aftermath of that immediate airstrike, and that's what we have here next for you, is some of the footage immediately coming after the airstrikes here in Dahak.
برا خوده گلا کشتیه تای سر میگن ناف عربا دا برین داره تایم برا خوده.
This is the official statement coming from the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This came out today. This is the press release regarding the attack carried out in Iraq's Dahak province. We have, quote, "We have learned with deep sorrow that, according to preliminary reports, 8 people lost their lives and 23 people were injured in an attack carried out today, July the 20th, to the stream side of the Zakho district of Iraq's Dahak province. We wish Allah's mercy upon those who lost their lives, extend our condolences to the relatives of the deceased, as well as a friendly and brotherly people of the government of Iraq, and wish speedy recovery to the injured in this sad event. Turkey is against all kinds of attacks targeting civilians. Turkey carries out its fight against terrorism in accordance with international law with utmost sensitivity in the protection of civilians, civilian infrastructure, historical and cultural property, and the environment. It is considered that such attacks, which aim at innocent civilians, are assessed to be organized by the terrorist organization, target our country's just and determined stance in the fight against terrorism. Turkey is ready to take all steps to reveal the truth. We invite the Iraqi government officials not to make statements under the influence of the rhetoric and propaganda of the treacherous terrorist organization, and to cooperate in bringing the real perpetrators of this tragic incident to the light." And so I will refrain from commenting on that. As we move over here, this is near the Diyala province, with the border of the Sudaim province in Iraq, and the Islamic State attacked a federal police barracks. There was a major attack by Islamic State terrorists last night in the area of the Mutai Bizia on the border of the Diyala and Salahuddin governorates. First, the militants attacked the barracks of the federal police, and then the reinforcements that came to the rescue. A fierce clash ensued, and the terrorists were forced to retreat only after the intervention of aviation forces, meaning they requested close air support. As a result of the attack, 6 federal police officers were killed, and another 4 people were also injured. We jump down here into Sri Lanka, where Ranil, oh man, I'm going to butcher this so bad, Ranil Wickremesinghe became the new president of the country of Sri Lanka after lawmakers voted on for the acting president to be the new president on Wednesday, hoping his long experience in government can help pull the country out of a crippling economic and political crisis. The 6-time prime minister won 134 votes and a 225-member parliament, despite public anger with the ruling elite after months of severe shortages of fuel, food, and medicines. The response to his win was broadly muted, with only around 100 people gathered on the steps of the presidential secretariat. The issue with this is that Ranil, the problem with this is that he was created as the acting president following he was the prime minister, and then the president fled the country on the day he was supposed to resign. Well, the people didn't like the prime minister either and have called for his resignation, including acts of violence at this point across the country, and the government voted him in anyway. So people, to say the least, are pretty fed up with the government stuff at this point, and I have a feeling we're going to see some serious repercussions as a result. You can take a look here. So, needless to say, not the people of Sri Lanka are not the happiest. We jump over here into Panama, where protests continue as the prices for fuel and food continue to surge. Hundreds of people took to the streets of Panama City on Wednesday, or today, to protest the governments that have failed efforts to stem the rising cost of living, among other demands. Across the Central American nation, protesters blocked roads and stopped trucks from delivering food, a pressure tactic that has been increasingly used since protests initially broke out about 2 weeks ago, when inflation accelerated to 5.2% in the year through June. Protesters are also demanding that the government curb public spending apart from new investments in health and education and bring a halt to corruption. Blockades are now leading to shortages, particularly of agricultural products in the capital of Panama City. If you would like to read more about that, you can go check out Reuters, who has a more in-depth article regarding the situation. And that brings us up here into the United States, where we have a couple of different things. First of all, we jump over here to the Pentagon, where Ukraine is going to be receiving 20 HIMARS in total. The U.S. has also announced that it has trained over 200 Ukrainian troops on the HIMARS multi-launch rocket system and given them 12 thus far. We can see that from a Pentagon briefing, which occurred today.
As of today, we have transferred 12 HIMARS to Ukraine. This is part of more than 20 that the United States and our allies have committed. Trained also are 200 Ukrainians on the HIMARS, and that training continues with many more. And we've transferred, as the Secretary indicated, hundreds of Gimler munitions. As of today,
and that's coming from General Milley, who's the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Here on the U.S. Capitol building today, as we had talked about a little bit yesterday, is the fact that the First Lady of Ukraine, Olena Zelenska, actually spoke and gave a speech to Congress, and she appealed to U.S. lawmakers to provide more aid for her country, specifically more weapons. She wanted more weapons for her country to be able to fight back with. And that is it struggles into month 5 at this point against the Russian invasion, saying weapons would help assure a joint great victory. quote, I am asking for weapons that would not be used to wage a war on somebody else's land, but to protect one's home and the right to wake up alive in that home. I'm asking for air defense systems in order for rockets not to kill. And we do have several sources, mostly from Reuters, regarding this. And you guys can go check out the full transcript and the full video from our website, where you can actually just check out on all of the maps that we have and go poke and prod at the points yourselves. Over here in Indiana, here in Lafayette, we can see where a man saved 5 people from a house fire. Nick Bostick, of 25 years old, from Lafayette, was driving early on July the 11th when a fire was raging through a household. He stopped, ran inside to alert his residents. He says the serious injuries he suffered were, quote, all worth it. A GoFundMe page was set up for Bostick to help pay for his hospital and medical bills, which has raised more than $470,000 by this as of this Wednesday's afternoon, far surpassing its initial $100,000 goal.
What do you got? 6-year-old female and a 23-year-old male, possibly inside. Are you Xavion?
That's everybody.
Sit down. Need medic.
I need oxygen.
Hey, we gotta get away from the house, okay? Walk across the street with me.
All right, sit down.
Let's get him away from the house.
You're okay, baby. You're okay.
Hey, sit on the grass for me, okay? Hey, where are you hurt? Arm? Yeah. Here, lay on your back, dude. All right.
I was gonna die. Weak.
Here, raise your arm up for me, man.
I can barely.
Here. Raise his arm up for me.
Hey, somebody, two medics.
I know it's gonna hurt, okay, but we're gonna stop the bleeding. All right?
Go for it.
Stay up, okay?
That smoke go fast.
Yeah.
So that's pretty awesome to see, needless to say. Fantastic Hoosier right there. Anyway, as we jump down here into Florida, the NASA's Mega Moon rocket, also known as the Artemis mission, is going to be looking at a possible launch date as soon as August 29th. So Artemis is the first mission back to the moon. There's going to be a series of missions. This very first one is a 6-week-long trip, which is going to go around the moon. They're basically going to slingshot it, much like they did with the initial Apollo missions before actually conducting the moon landing. And they are going to be conducting this once again with NASA's new Artemis rocket, which they just finished testing not too long ago and checking out the final stages of it, including a test on moving it to the launch pad down here in Cape Canaveral. So the mission objective of the mission is to test the effectiveness of the Orion's heat shield, which will be subjected to temperatures about half as hot as the sun when the capsule plunges through Earth's atmosphere during re-entry. The recovery capsule, after it splashes down into the ocean, is then thoroughly studied for its wear and tear, allowing for astronauts to ride aboard it in the future launches. Artemis 2 will be the mission's first crewed flight, flying astronauts around the moon but not landing there. Artemis 3 will see astronauts touch down on the lunar South Pole with the goal of establishing a permanent base on the moon. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Artemis is going to be establishing an actual base and colony on the moon. We're going to make a moon base. Isn't that amazing? You know what that means? This is the first step. Making a lunar base is the first step for humanity in order to go and talking about things like Mars colonies. This is, having a moon base is where we test things for Mars, where we test, new equipment, new everything for Mars, new ways to recycle, how are we going to provide energy on an energy poor planet for long-term missions, long-term stays. That's the truth of it, and this is the first phase, and this is going to make things a lot easier going forward once we actually get a base set up. But those missions are going to be looking at further into the future, but not super far. We may see the beginning of the new space age here within our very own lifetimes, and here hopefully within the next about less than decade or so. So that's pretty awesome to see. But the first launch is going to be taking place, they said it's either going to be August 29th, September the 2nd, or September the 5th. So we're looking at 3 possible launch dates about, just over a month into the future here. It's not the only cool thing that's happened today. We checked down here where a lost city was discovered, possibly here in Iraq, nestled in a valley between in the mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan. It sits an ancient fortress that archaeologists may think be the royal city of Natania, based on the discovery of intricately carved rock reliefs depicting of an ancient leader. The stronghold, known as Rabbana Markuli, was once part of the Parthian Empire, also known as the Arsacid Empire, which reigned between 247 BC and 224 AD. The recent expeditions by the International Team of Archaeologists discovered twin rock reliefs, which were at the 2 entrances of the settlement, and situated at the base of Mount Pira Magrun in the Zagros Mountains. The matching reliefs are depicted of King Adibin. The kingdom was part of the Parthian Empire prior to this find. The only known depictions of the existence of Natuanina, also known as Natuini Siracoretta. I'm sorry, I am so terrible at pronunciation. Have been documented on several coins dating back from about the 1st century BC. But we can go ahead and take a look at this. So it's just a little, very, not a lot's there. You would quickly and easily overlook this if you weren't knowing what you're looking for. But you can see these reliefs going on here with some of the steps and everything. So pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed. And if you want to check out more on that, you can check out Life Science or the actual paper, which is published by Cambridge. And as we jump over here over by Hong Kong, this is scientists have designed dentures using artificial intelligence. Currently, the process for designing and creating new dentures is pretty highly time-consuming and exists in a computerized design process that requires very tedious manual inputs, teeth oculation information, collection of as well as multiple denture fittings and procedures due to limited accuracy of these new technologies. For researchers in the Faculty of Dentistry at the University of Hong Kong, or the HKU, and the Department of Computer Science at Zhuhai College for Higher Education collaborated to develop a new approach to using artificial intelligence to automate the design of individualized dentures in order to enhance the treatment efficiency and improve patient experience. AI technology is used in the process was based on a 3G generative adversarial network, or the 3D GAN algorithm, and tested on 175 participants recruited at the Hong Kong University. The study shows that AI technology could reconstruct the shape of the natural teeth, or the natural healthy tooth, and automate the process of false teeth design with high accuracy. And we can check out with the official press release coming from Hong Kong University. Which is pretty sweet. So a lot of cool developments there. It's always nice to see stuff coming out which may improve the lives of patients and people around the world. But that is actually it for everything ongoing here in the world. There's a lot of stuff that happens. There's some stuff that we couldn't verify, such as that the new telescope, the James Webb Telescope, may have been catastrophically destroyed. So we're going to be looking more into that. Hopefully we'll be able to report on that a little bit tomorrow. Reportedly, it got hit by a micrometeorite, which we'll have to see, but we just couldn't independently verify that. But there's a lot of other stuff going on throughout the world. Hopefully there's a lot of good developments, especially as we start to see more HIMARS usage. Hopefully there's a lot more good developments when it comes to Ukraine and against anti-terrorism measures and stuff like that. But a lot of the stuff that is obviously getting reported and a lot of stuff that we see here just really isn't good things. I mean, we go out of our way to find good stuff. And the thing is that with that means there's a lot of suffering. There are people that are suffering because of food shortages, or, they have water insecurities, they're in conflict zones and everything else. But luckily you guys can help with that, because we're the news that goes back. We want to be able to give back directly to the same news stories we're talking about here on the channel every single day. So please check out the video description below. You're going to see a ton of organizations. You're going to see the link to our Discord. If you have more, jump on our Discord, let a staff member know, give them the link, give them a short description of what's going on with that fundraiser or that charity, and we will get to vetting that immediately. We're already vetting one right now, and we're constantly looking to add to that list, so please continue to send those to us. If you can't give a lot to these organizations, give it a little. If you can't give anything at all, then give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us, because ultimately the more people that see this and the more people that come here and join our community, the more good we're going to be able to do overall. And of course, the more people can enjoy the news. So we're never doing super chats. We're never pushing merchandise. 100% of what we do is for charity. We're trying to bring you some, at least clearly stated by, or if we have a bias, we clearly state it. But for the most part, unbiased and apolitical news, independent news for you guys. So thank you so much for supporting the channel. Even more so, thank you very much for supporting those organizations and your continual support with our endeavor. But with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your night. I hope to see you guys once again tomorrow back here on the stream for another 24 hours in review of the news. I hope that you, your friends, and your family remain safe. And if not, I hope you find that safety and security in the very near future. Thank you for joining us tonight. I will see you hopefully once again at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 p.m. Central tomorrow night for another 24 hours. So my name is Paul from the New News, and have a fantastic rest of your guys' night.